Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Gemba360 legal update session that we are running. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director of the law firm Kaizen Synergy. We are the ones that operate the Gemba360 platform that your agency uses, and are delighted to see so many people joining us today. This session focuses on the COVIDSafe plan rules. It builds off the session that we did run last week and also now includes some of the JobMaker announcements that the Prime Minister Scott Morrison referred to earlier this week. In addition to that, as people start to look to return to work, we are going to be focusing on a couple of key areas that your agency does need to look at, and also just cover some of the new rules that we are seeing as restrictions are now easing across Australia and what it means for your agency. So those are the main things we're going to focus on today. As always, this session is recorded right up to the Q&A part of the webinar, where we do open out the computer lines and phone lines, and more than happy to stay on the line to answer any questions that people might have. As always, we pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly as well too. So let's move forwards and actually have a look to see what we are actually covering off here as well. So the COVIDSafe plan was something that we actually covered off last week, and it is divided into 3 different steps. And this matches what the Commonwealth was actually focusing on from last week. Now, with this, we have then included as part of this whole process the JobMaker announcement as well. And what we can see here is that from the specific announcement made earlier this week, effectively there are 2 major focuses for the JobMaker, that being the industrial relations and also the skills program. And we'll actually come to that as we're going through this presentation as well. You can see that we've actually included that as part of our COVIDSafe plan matrix that we have, and you can see my slides up here. With this, the reason for that is because the industrial relations is going to be a major restructure of how things are being done. It has been flagged by the Morrison government. It also brings into line what we're talking about earlier this week in relation to the recent federal court announcement as well too, or decision, not announcement, but decision on casual workforce and how that impacts upon contracts and no firm commitment decisions of what the federal court made a decision on in that case. And we ran a legal update earlier this week to that effect as well. In addition to that is the JobMaker Skills Program. And again, this has been flagged. We have placed this in for agencies because there is this talk about upskilling and better utilizing and improving the skills that staff and other employees have. So as part of this, within your COVIDSafe plan, we have also included as 2 new projects and indicators, the JobMaker, and focused on 2 parts, the industrial relations and also the skills program. As these move forwards over the upcoming months, Scott Morrison has focused to say that these will be looked at over the next 4 months, and has actually given a pretty specific timeline in that regard, because effectively the idea that the current job seeker and other programs has a limited timelines in terms of those funding arrangements. So with it, we have included these 2 new indicators as part of this process within this particular reference point as well too for you. So let's have a look at the agenda as well too. This builds off the COVIDSafe plan requirements that we actually spoke of last week. We looked at the legal compliance framework, policy directives, the focus on the framework and structure, and also operational considerations such as engagement of staff. In addition to that, we did mention that the COVIDSafe plan should consist of a plan, obviously, but divided into three different sections. The policies that actually support it, specifically the focus on work health and safety, risk management, and now what we're actually suggesting as well too, and let's be quite clear about this, being the HR skills audit, and also what we're saying is the knowledge hub to actually support your agency in looking at some of the opportunities that it may well be presented, specifically around the JobMaker program itself as well too. So we have focused as part of this process, and let's be quite clear on this, the HR skills audit and also knowledge hub as part of your process that you have as well. And let's have a look at this. So let's have a look to start off with around the current rules and where we're sitting at the moment, because that is important, because that will drive what your agency is doing and where you need to actually be and position yourselves. So effectively, as part of the COVID-19, what are the public health rules now across Australia and where are we sitting? So effectively, what we're seeing is physical distancing and hand washing are still the order of the day, but socializing in moderation and gathering in small groups outdoors are back in our tentative, what they're calling the post-ISO world. I don't really like sort of describing it. I know that a lot of the media will talk of the post-ISO world and effectively as part of this. But let's be quite clear from a public health point of view that COVID-19 and the coronavirus itself, as the public knows it, is not just switched on during business hours and we forget about it after work sessions. So while the social isolation, they're calling it the post-isolation world, there is still a directive that mandates that we should be really working from home where possible, and there is effectively some sort of isolation at hand as well too. So with the number of COVID-19 cases relatively low in Australia compared to most other nations, the Commonwealth Government has provided the three-step roadmap for states and territories to start to carefully relax some of the restrictions on movement. And they have made reference to the roadmap step 1, step 2, step 3 that you can effectively see. And as part of that, what we are now seeing is this process to effectively bring people back to work and effectively allow the easing of restrictions. So what we are seeing from really June 1, which is one of the main target dates in Victoria, is that Victorians will be allowed to gather up to 20 people in their homes, including the members of their household. For a family of 5, that means 15 visitors. Public gatherings, indoor and outdoor, will increase to 20. Cafes, restaurants and pubs may serve meals up to 20 people. There's increases in overnight stays, which will be allowed by both private residents and hotels. Campgrounds, beauty therapies, galleries and museums will now open, but you can start to see that even up to weddings include this rule of generally 20 people. Now, one of the areas that has come up during discussion is this. Agencies have approached us saying, look, staff have been wanting, because they've been in isolation, wanting to organize get-togethers. And this includes up to 20 people outside work hours. Now, with this, one of the questions has been, can we restrict staff to actually either not do this or to make sure that they are conscious of social distancing rules? The short answer is yes, and that's been our position from a legal compliance point of view, that we have advised agencies. And our thoughts around this are quite simple. So with it, firstly, the coronavirus does not discriminate between work hours and after hours or time at home. So with it, it's not like it simply switches off when you are when you leave work and go home. The social gatherings that you might have, especially if it involves people from work, would be no different than if you're trying to organize a social gathering during a tea break or a lunch break. So the simple fact that if it is a social gathering involving work colleagues at somebody's home, then there is quite simply work health and safety obligations that apply when you're at work. So these work health and safety obligations, both on employees and also employers, exist during normal business hours. Now, this would equally apply in this case to employees where there is a social gathering. It's around your work colleagues, and that then is taken to somebody's home. So in that case, we have suggested that there is an obligation, work health and safety obligation on employees to ensure appropriate social isolation. I'll come to what this looks like in a minute. And also whether it should be allowed or permitted outside work hours, because it certainly wouldn't be for lunchtime kind of get-togethers in close proximity of each other. Now, with it, it is something that it's not permanent, that is there. And increasingly, as we move through the upcoming months, the idea is that these restrictions will be eased, as we are seeing now. It's not simply a return to work as per normal that we've seen pre this public health challenge that we're currently going through. Now, with it, as part of this, you can also see that from June 1, libraries, youth centres and community facilities allowed to reopen with no more than 20 people in a single area. Now, this equally applies for your agencies around shared facilities, shared services and shared sites as well. So if you do have, and if you are working in a co-located space as well, if you are providing if shared office space to other agencies as well too, again, these are all the kind of rules that you need to look at applying within your own program area as well, and things that you do need to maintain social distancing during this time. One of the other parts, especially if you are working in aged care facilities, education type facilities as well too, there's specific rules that apply to yourselves, and also if you are serving food as well too to the general public. For example, pubs, cafes, restaurants will be required to have tables 1.5 metres apart from June 1, and businesses must abide by physical distancing requirements where it is one person per 4 square metres. People visiting or patrons visiting pubs, cafes, restaurants will have to give their names for potential contact tracing in case of an outbreak occurs at the venue. Equally, from June 22nd, this could increase to 50 patrons, and by mid-July up to 100, as earmarked by Daniel Andrews. In the meantime, it's still takeaway only. Now, these types of rules, what we've seen community health services ask us is, does this then apply to services like aged care services, migrant resource centres where you might be running group classes and outside programs? If you are a NDIS funded agency or registered standalone community health centre, what are some of the programs, and do we need to manage our scaling up of our programs to match these requirements? And our answer to that is generally yes. Obviously, there are exceptions based on specific requirements that you may have, but again, the general answer is yes, but you've got to look at maintaining these specific 1.5 metre rules and also one person per square 4 metres. So one of the areas that we will look at is the work health and safety obligations that you need to have as people return to general office work as well. For agencies, for example, that might be running aged care services, community health and well-being programs. Again, as you return to work, or if you are in current workspace, then these are the rules that should actually be applied. And it is taken directly from work health and safety guidelines that your agency should be considering. And I will come to those and show you what those look like as well. So with it, these are some of the operational requirements in Victoria, and I will come to the other states as well too. Public health rules first came into force when Victorians could leave home for only 4 reasons. These are listed here. There is now a 5th reason, and that is visiting friends and families. So with this, effectively, what we are seeing is that the direction has been that Victorians should continue to work from home where possible, at least until the end of June. Premier Daniel Andrews has had this to say on the return to work, and it's a quote that we're using, which will guide a lot of the policy decisions and what we're going to talk about shortly around your COVIDSafe plan and how these rules affect your agency. It is quite simply the view of the Chief Health Officer and his team that if we have literally millions of people returning to office environments and other places of work where they don't need to be there, and doing things like pressing lift buttons, opening doors, congregating in kitchens, sharing bathrooms, all the natural, normal things that happen which you can't really protect against. That presents the biggest risk for the stability that we have experienced in our numbers to date. Now, taking this effectively guides us on what we're talking about from returning to work. And a number of agencies have said, well, how do we scale this back? This answer, this statement covers off work health and safety requirements around maintaining your social distancing. It says that you should limit the number of people returning to work, and it may well be just a management group to start with over the next week, and then easing it into 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc., and having people continuing to work from home where that is the case. Also, as part of this, from a social gathering point of view, and as I mentioned, one of the questions that has come up by a number of agencies saying that people wanted to organize social get-togethers from people at work and take them home if they're allowed up to 20 people. Well, this one here really talks about that you don't want people congregating in kitchens at work. So you wouldn't be doing this outside work, because let's remember the coronavirus doesn't discriminate between normal work hours and after hours when you're at home. So with it, the idea is that we still maintain the social distancing rules that are in place, even though restrictions are easing. What we are also seeing is similar rules across New South Wales as well too, but the specific restrictions do vary. It's really around the timelines and quantities of people that can get together or aggregate together as well too. We're seeing the same thing in Queensland as well too. The major difference here that state borders remain. The recreational travel limit is 150 k's, but holiday travel will be allowed in some regions from June the 12th. I mention this because there are, as we are moving towards schools returning, and that's happening at the moment in Victoria and around the country. But what will come out of this is policy directions that your agencies need to have in place, specifically around travel. Now, I am going to focus on when you look at Queensland that they are allowing travel. Victoria is allowing overnight stays as well too. South Australia, we're also seeing from June the 12th, is allowing some regional holiday travel as well too. They have put 150 kilometers from home as well too. But as we're moving towards not only schools returning and then shortly after that, the school holidays as well too, your agency will be asked around, well, what are the holiday restrictions that our agency has in place. So again, this is where we are preparing as part of this process what staff will actually ask. We're seeing the same things around Tasmania, and again, all of these slides we will circulate to you to actually have a look at and as your reference point as we run through these for yourselves as well. Now, moving to the COVIDSafe plan for your agency and looking at these rules. If you remember, what we did suggest from last week, and I've just built off this, was starting with the duties of directors and officers. And all people joining us today either in the quality and compliance role, in the corporate services role, CEOs as well too, or program directors and support staff as well. So you do have some duties as directors and officers under the work health and safety guidelines that your agency must follow. As we've mentioned in the past, what we have done is look at, just go back one slide, there we go, is around your COVIDSafe plan requirements. Now, if I just bring this up to our live site, and I will just slide this across and show you what we have done for you around this, is effectively under the pandemic module side, and we use this and a lot of other agencies use this. I'm using it as a demonstration site. You can see that we've got the plan 1, plan 2, step 1, step 2, and step 3 as part of the COVIDSafe plan. You've got your JobMaker and you've got your job skills indicator projects, as well. With it, if we look at the current COVIDSafe plan, step 1, we have the list of items, and these were covered off from last week. What is important as you return to work, and the focus of this specifically, is around your work health and safety obligations that your agency needs to follow. There are 3 or 4 different areas that we will focus on as part of this requirement. The first one is your workplace checklist. And you can see I've just got my documents listed here under the COVIDSafe plan step 1. Each one of you do have access to these documents, and we will be circulating these out as well. So for your sites, what's important around this, whether you're currently looking at reopening from Monday next week and bringing your management team back, or alternative, if you're running, for example, aged care services, this is the checklist to actually utilize as well too. Other community health centers doing exactly the same thing, along with registered standalone community health services and migrant resource centers. So as your agency opens, what WorkSafe have Safe Work have requested agencies to look at is to utilize the checklist around making the assessment around people working from home to start with. Have you met these requirements? In terms of limiting the spread as well too within your sites, looking at whether you've got the physical distancing rules in place, and also whether you've got procedures for hand washing as well. We have set these up as checklist tools on your toolbar as well, and this allows you to monitor cleaning, monitor symptoms, and monitoring the plan ahead. Agencies have asked us, how many times do we actually need to do this? And the short answer for this is that it depends on how frequently your service site actually changes and how many times you or what through traffic you actually have. If it is around, for example, the working from home, it may well be that you do this once a week as part of your general check. For each site, it may well be that every time the cleaner comes through, you just make sure that the cleaners are effectively signing off on section 3 as part of this, and also section 4 as well. You may have once a month your work health and safety team monitoring that you monitor the symptoms out. So with it, and then of course you've got planning ahead, which leads into the COVID plan too. So as part of that, and this includes things like putting a protocol in place for reopening your workplace. So you can see that this will effectively change. Now, as we go through step 1, step 2, step 3, this form will be utilized. We have loaded this onto your Gemba dashboard, located basically on this toolbar on the left-hand side here, which will allow you to then effectively keep a record of what's been done and when for you. The other part that you need to look at as part of these rules changing that we've just covered off is information for employers. Now, from an HRM point of view, what you do need to look at is this. Effectively, here it is here, the information to employees. And again, we've divided these out into your indicator sets. This has come directly from the Commonwealth around their specific information that employees should be across. And part of this is also ensuring, firstly, that they are, and I'll use this one here, supporting employees to adhere to official advice about how to help reduce the spread of COVID-19. It means also that it covers things like trained staff on hand hygiene and social distancing. So while we've put this up and utilizing this is because if staff are thinking about doing things like organizing social get-togethers outside work, then this is actually going to be important that they actually understand their responsibilities as well as what the employer's responsibilities are as well. You can also see that they're talking about discouraging carpooling between employees to and from work. So again, what we're talking about here is ensuring that you have the key policies and notifications that staff need to be aware about. In terms of doing things like training staff on hand hygiene and social distancing, we have set these up under your specific Gemba College and e-learning module, which you all have access to. That is not something additional in any means. It is something that agencies have been using throughout this process. The other part document that we are relying on is the physical distancing checklist as well too, as staff return to work, and you're looking at this, and this gives you your workplace checklist that you need to have, and it is from Safe Work. So again, we've got these template documents ready for you to utilize. It means that every site can be audited, and part of this is to ensure that you've got these specific requirements in place. Each one of these checklists will assist you, as Safe Work points out, to implement social distance or physical distancing measures at your workplace. Very clearly, it spells this out. It means that it sets the minimum standards that your agency needs to meet and provides you with some degree of certainty around what do we do and when. So with it, again, you've got this access to this information. Again, agencies have said to us, how many times do we need to do this daily? How many times this works? Well, no. It is about just ensuring that you've got your physical distancing measures in place as different work sites start to open up. If you're already in this space, then you should be looking at utilizing these to get some guidelines in around this. And I know a lot of aged care and community health centers have started to utilize these documents as we see. The other two documents that we can see, and we've just loaded them as you can see here, is around the good hygiene. And we've got specific just webinars around each of these, which is around informing staff for the checklist that they need to mandate. And remember, under work health and safety guidelines, it's not all the obligations on agencies and employers. It is also on employees to ensure that they've got and they meet and they comply with these specific requirements, and it is also a Commonwealth Government directive as well. So it is around just making sure that people are actually going through and marking these off, and you can effectively utilize these as people return to work and ensure that they are meeting these specific requirements. So with it, as the rules start to relax, and what we are suggesting is that for these ones, you don't have to do it every single day. What we are suggesting, as staff return to work, we're going to and we go through step 1 of the, I'll call it the Commonwealth and Scott Morrison's return to work and also roadmap back to normals, as he said. Then as we go through step 1, step 2, step 3, we're going to utilize these safe work checklists to make sure that your agencies are meeting their minimum work health and safety requirements, and we've got these structures in place to support you. The last one that we're also utilizing is the cleaning checklist document as well too. Now, the cleaning checklist document, again, can be provided to your cleaning staff as well. And what we'd suggest is every time that they go through, you can simply give them this document, and that way they've marked it off. In Gemba, we've just put the date on this so that way it can be loaded in for you as well too. And it's divided up into your routine cleaning. It confirms when should you actually do the cleaning. And if we go back to Daniel Andrews' statement around not having everybody show up and touching the light switches and all this sort of, things that people would ordinarily do. Agencies have said, geez, do we have to clean the photocopier and sanitize it every time somebody touches the buttons? Well, this gives us, and you can see trolleys, baskets, checkouts, FPOS machines, handrails, and elevator buttons are covered here as well too. It also covers cupboard handles and cleaning tops. So we've got the guidelines that we can actually utilize around this as well. And these forms are ready for yourselves to utilize. As we move through step 1, step 2, step 3, and the rules are relaxed, then we will effectively see these processes start to change as we go through what we are seeing within the agencies and your COVIDSafe plan requirements as well. So with it, just jumping through our previous slides as well, we have summarized a lot of this documentation down. There is a lot of information out there. With it, what we are moving towards, and you can see these slides in our past webinars, we are simply building on this. We are looking at not just employers and directors and officers or managers being accountable for the return to work under this COVID-19, but also what employees can contribute to you. In doing that, having and utilizing some of these registers that you can see here, the idea is that these will then feed back into your COVIDSafe plan. And you can see we've got things like the governance reporting that your agency can also utilize as well. The e-learning module as well too is there for yourselves to utilize. That is already switched on. The resources are there and available for your agency to utilize. And what you can effectively start to utilize is these checklists for yourselves to access as well. So with it, what we are suggesting as part of our recommendations during this session is to build on your COVIDSafe plan. It should consist of obviously the 3-step plan. As the JobMaker announcements are being made, we are including those compliance requirements and also looking at the skills matrix, looking at the skills audits as well too, and the knowledge hub for your agency, especially where incentives and announcements are being made by the Commonwealth to support work in that space. Especially the industrial relations JobMaker announcement is going to be a focus, and I will just mention and reference again the federal court's recent decision around casual workforce and how that might impact as well too. I'm sure that's going to be one of the significant areas that the Minister for Industrial Relations will actually focus on as part of the industrial relations reforms coming out of the JobMaker areas. And that's why we have flagged that already in the COVIDSafe plan. In terms of the policy decisions, again, looking at the key rules that they apply, focusing at this stage, really, it is going to be very heavy over the next fortnight on the work health and safety forms and guidelines that I've just referenced today. And these will then be relaxed, as you can see, as rules then get extended from the 1st of June as well. Today we have covered off the WorkSafe policies and guidelines, as well as the fair work obligations as well. We have looked at conducting the site audits, which we've also recommended as well too. And these are certainly can be utilized within your agency as part of your documents. We will open up the phone lines and computer lines and answer any questions that people might have. While we are doing that, I will just say thank you for attending today's session. We will be running further sessions over each week as rules do change for you as well too. These will be shorter sessions to ensure that you are kept up to date with these specific legal compliance changes. If you do have any questions, as always, please contact us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at any time at support@gemba360.com.